am so nervous to record this video. I've been wanting to do it for a super duper long time because I love listening to people's testimonies on YouTube, on podcasts, in person, just all of it. I love hearing about how people lived before Christ and then how God has extremely changed their life. And it's always for the better. So I am really excited to share with you guys what my life looks like before Christ and how I ultimately came to Christ, and now what my life looks like as a Christian. The reason that I'm so nervous is because I have been through things that I am not proud of, and I'm not proud of them, but I'm also not ashamed by them because who I used to be, let's put it this way, I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for the things that I've gone through. And it's just so funny whenever I tell people that I meet and I become friends with, it comes up in conversation, my past, and they're just like, what? I could never see you doing any of that, or I could never see you, just being that kind of person. And I totally was that kind of person. So I'm going to be kind of like referencing this document that I typed up back in, I think it was 2017. No, not 2017. Maybe like 2015, 2016. I was finally graduating a program called drug court, and at the end of drug court, like before you graduate, one of the things that you have to do is you have to write a letter to the judge, and just kind of share your testimony, because they do share your testimony as well. It's not like a Christian thing, but they have to share your like before and after at graduation, because they want to brag about all of the good that's come from the program. Also, just a quick disclaimer, I am going to be vague about a few things or leave some things out just for the sake of my husband's privacy, because my husband is a more private person than I am. So if I'm vague about something and you want to know more, maybe that resonated with you and you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to chat with her about it, please message me. My Instagram is public. You can comment down on this video and we can get in touch and we can be friends. Okay, so let's just start off with a little bit of family background. I'm Mexican. Both of my parents are from Mexico, and I'm a first generation American, so they came to this country and had to build their life for the ground up, and they did it, just like many immigrants do, for a better life for their children. And that's exactly what my parents did. They were so hardworking. We were living in places that were not, I'm sure they weren't ideal for my parents to put us in, kind of like sharing, just renting rooms or living with family members in like a really small apartment and just not in the best areas at all. And I grew up in Georgia. So then after my parents worked hard enough to get us out of that, we moved to this small town in Georgia, and it is a spectacular town. I think as far as education goes, safety goes, it's just a really amazing place to raise a family, and it still very much is. And so they bought a house. It was by the lake, and I lived like on this dead-end street at the very end. It was like a cul-de-sac, I guess, and I loved living there, and I have so many beautiful memories of living there. And my neighbor was my age, and she and her family were just the perfect American family. In my opinion, just coming from a Mexican family, although it was so beautiful in its own way, and of course it still is, I really couldn't see that. I feel like I always, up until maybe like my 20s, I've always just had a little bit of resentment for where I came from, and just because the place that I grew up in, we were the minorities. It was like a bunch of these beautiful white families, and I just always wanted that, which is so unobtainable and it's so silly. But I wanted the blonde hair, I wanted the blue eyes, so this family was that. And I just loved being at their house. I loved, their mom taught me so much, and they started taking me to church, and it was Sunday school kind of thing. I don't really remember much of what was taught, what I learned, but what I do know was I loved being there because I've always been a very social person, and I've always been very much like a doer. I just loved doing things. It's still to this very day, I cannot sit at home and just do nothing. That was most of my experience in church. So my family was very hardworking for us. I didn't grow up with a stay-at-home mom. My mom had to work too. They were gone a lot. I feel like I was home alone a lot, and I know that they probably thought that was their only option, and it was a good option for us because I had everything that I ever wanted growing up, like physically, like tangible things. I always had them, and I'm so thankful to my parents for that. But I think that their absence probably played a part in just the way that I came to grow up, especially now being a stay-at-home mom, me knowing the fruit that comes from being present for your children and raising your children yourself. I think that let's just say that I don't look back and regret what my parents did, but I think that I'm going to take that and just be more present with my son James and my future children. But my family on the outside was awesome, looked great, but my dad did struggle with alcoholism, which is crazy because my parents did a really good job at hiding, for lack of a better word, hiding the hard things that they went through, whether it was money problems or whether it was my dad's alcoholism. They did such a good job at sheltering my sister and I from that, and the only reason that I know that my dad was an alcoholic, aside from just hindsight's 2020, I know now, but when I was growing up, we would attend his AA ship ceremonies and stuff, and that was always good, but we were always kind of confused. I didn't really ever understand because they didn't actually ever talk to us about it. But so yeah, my dad was on and off struggling with alcohol. Around this time, my mom had breast cancer for the first time, and I can't imagine how hard that was on them, and I can't imagine just financially, physically, emotionally. We were sheltered from it and we didn't talk about it, and I really, really, really wish that we would have talked more. So then we moved from that house, an amazing house, and we moved into another amazing house in a different area of town, and this is when I started middle school. And at this time I had built my core group of girlies, and we had a lot of fun together. We got into some trouble, and it started off with us just stealing the alcohol. My parents never kept alcohol in the house, obviously, because my dad had problems. My dad would just sneak beers, but we would be at my other friends' houses and we would take their alcohol. But it was so hard to drink, but we were rebellious enough to steal their alcohol and want to get drunk. And where does that even come from, truly? The desire to want to be bad. I truly think it's just all demonic, and it's just all spiritual attacks that the enemy places in your life. It's a gradual thing where your life starts to deconstruct and fall apart and starts to push you further away from the Lord. Shortly after that, we began to sneak out. We began to lie to our parents about where we were going. Maybe it was we're going to the movies, just drop us off at the movie theater, and then we would be going somewhere else. Or maybe we had some random person come and pick us up and take us to a party or something. It got really dangerous. If we ever went missing, our parents wouldn't have any idea of where to even start to look, because we always were in a different place. So then around freshman year, I started smoking the devil's lettuce. So we were smoking the devil's lettuce, and we were also robo tripping. If you don't know what that is, bless your heart, that is amazing. But basically it's when you take way too much cough medicine and you start tripping like you're on acid or something. It's crazy. We would steal those pills from the grocery store and take a bunch. Around this time was the time that my dad's alcoholism was getting really bad because my parents were separating. We were in the house for a little bit, like while my dad wasn't present, and I remember like I was still sneaking out, I was still doing bad things, and still smoking, still doing the robo tripping, still drinking, still sneaking out, still hanging around people I shouldn't have been hanging out with, still around boys, it was just no bueno. Whenever we realized, okay, like it's not sustainable to be in this house without my dad's help, we ended up moving to an apartment complex. And again, I have such a bad timeline, but I think that this was around like sophomore year. We moved from that neighborhood and we moved into this apartment complex that wasn't the best. I ended up making friends with a brother and sister, and I think they were a little younger than I was, but they were still like in high school or middle school, and their mom was prescribed a lot of pain medication. And this is where I began to escalate my drug use to things that I shouldn't have done. Any sort of pill, I'd take it and they'd give it to me. And I don't know, I like to say I've always had this like manipulative way of being, and I don't think I do that anymore, but back when I was younger, I had a way of being where I would get people to like me and get people to just kind of do whatever I want. Like growing up in school, I never did any work. I would just somehow always have people that I could copy off of, or that I could, cheat off of. So anyway, I started taking all of these drugs and everything just goes downhill. I don't have the words to use on how your life just kind of starts to, like, you just start acting different and you don't even realize it. Like, I just was probably being a bad friend. I was probably being a bad daughter. I was probably being a bad sister. I was definitely putting my mom and dad through a living hell. And still sneaking out, still doing crap I should not have been doing, still hanging around people that I had no business being around, still putting myself in situations where I could die and nobody would even be able to find my body. And one night I was who knows where, hours away from home on a New Year's party, and I met a boy, and this boy ended up introducing me to Xanax. And this is the start of my serious downhill. One night he ended up coming to visit me and brought Xanax and whatnot, so I snuck out of my house. And I was so messed up off of this drug. My mom found that I had been sneaking out. It was, past midnight, and my mom calls me and she's like, what the heck? Where are you? Come back home. And I did, and I was high, and she started yelling at me. She started very, again, now as a mother, I'm like, oh my gosh, I deserved every single, bad thing that you said to me. She ended up kicking me out of my house, and because I was on drugs when this happened, I didn't care. I was like, okay, heck yeah, I don't have to live under your roof and follow your rules. This is amazing. I was so happy, and I ended up living with one of the neighbors in the neighborhood. Their parents welcomed me with open arms, which if you're a parent, don't do that. Please always encourage your, kids to listen to their parents and stuff, because they started calling me their daughter. It was so weird. It got to the point where my mom was begging me to come home, that she was calling the school I don't remember what ended up happening, but I ended up coming home because I feel like the school was threatening me in some way, and maybe it was all like made up, but it worked and I got back home. So at this point, as I was taking more drugs, I kept getting kicked out of my house. I kept hanging around people that I shouldn't be hanging out with. This is around the time that, again, my parents were separated, and come to find out that my dad actually ended up passing away around this time, which, God bless him. I really, really, really hope to God that my dad is in heaven, because I would just love to see him again one day, and I hope that that's the case, because my dad was a good man, and it's just sad. But so as my mom was kicking me out left and right, I never flat out told her that I was doing drugs, and we never had a flat out conversation about me using drugs. But my mom would find drug paraphernalia, and I would be so high around her all the time, and she always had a suspicion, but she never talked about me. And again, I've grown a lot, and I don't hold anything against my mom, but I really do encourage you, if you are a parent, I would encourage you to have those conversations and not let shame and the fear of the truth coming to light stop you from having those tough conversations with your children, because she could have gotten me help, maybe, you know what I mean? Like, I could have gone to rehab, or I could have gotten something before I ended up getting arrested. So this is where the story gets kind of crazy, and my arrests happened so frequently, so often, that I don't have time to sit here and tell you every detail of every arrest. But if you want to hear those, please comment down below, and I can go into story times of all of the times that I've been to jail, and why I went to jail and stuff like that. But basically, when I turned 18, I got arrested for the first time, and this was a very petty, in my opinion, petty. It was misdemeanor charges. I was driving around without a license. That's a long story. I was giving false name. I was telling them that I was my older sister who I really looked like, and they didn't fall for it, so I ended up going to jail for the first time, and this put me on probation. Once you're on paper, is what people that are on paper call it. Once you're on paper, it's so easy for you to continue getting in trouble and going back to jail, because you're being held accountable. You have to, okay, let's put it this way. Once you're in the system, it's so hard to get out of the system, because it kind of sets you up for failure if you aren't ready to change, which I wasn't. And then a few months later, I got my first drug charges. And then a few months later, I actually got in trouble for drugs again, and I actually got in trouble at school. And this was my senior year of high school, and I got kicked out, and I never graduated. And I ended up getting my GED. So again, that actually ended up working out for me. I didn't want to go back to school as an older senior. I didn't want to go to an alternative school. I was too good for that, probably, in my mind. So I was like, oh yeah, I don't have to go to school anymore. This is cool. I'll just get my GED. And my lawyer at the time, she was encouraging it. She's like, just do it, and then just show that you can get it done, and just forget about it. At this point, I started to get drug tested all the time, and I was awaiting, final sentencing for, I don't even know if that's the right thing, but for the felony drug charges that I had, the ones that I got in school and whatever, I was still awaiting the verdict on those. God's hand was so prominent in so many of those moments where he truly, 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 for example, I'll give you just one example real quick. Me getting caught at school with drugs, I got caught because I sold drugs to somebody that got way too messed up, and he ended up, oh my gosh, I don't want to say ratting me out, because I just hate those terms now that I'm all out of that life. Oh my gosh, he was a rat. No, he got too messed up, and he told them who sold them the drugs, and he told them it was me, because it was, And I could have gotten possession on school property, I could have gotten distribution on school property, I could have gotten all these charges, and I didn't get those. That just goes to show God's hand in my life. Like, only getting the minimal of the charges for that is amazing. It helps getting out of that. It helps it so much. At this point in my life, in the back end of getting arrested, I move out of my mom's house. And I move in with somebody who is addicted to Xanax and also sells Xanax. And I loved her, and I still love her. Like, oh my gosh, now she's a mother and she's getting out of that, I think, and I hope. But we were a disaster, like, together. It was just not good. But I'm like living with somebody who is selling the item that I'm addicted to, essentially. Just anything, any pill that she had, I'd take. I was addicted to it all. And then it got to the point that her and I started to move over to things that weren't as expensive. We started doing drugs that are just not good. And I was not on trial, that's so dramatic, but I was like awaiting all of these drug charges, and I was in and out of jail, and I was overdosing, and I was homeless every like so often, and I just was not doing good things. So let me read you this directly, because when I turned 19, I moved out of my mom's house into a house with my roommate. Let's call her C. C was a drug dealer to feed her addiction, Roxy's. We couldn't stop, nor did we want to. All of our time, money, and efforts went to providing even more to feed our expensive addiction. At some point, it was a much cheaper and stronger alternative. At this point, our lives had a whole new meaning of worthlessness. We were living in a house with dirty dishes stacked up all over the kitchen counters. We had 15 plus bags of trash outside our house. Maggots had inhabited our home. We were too busy focusing on our fixes of and as well as smoking to mask any signs of withdrawals from our opiates. Around 2015, I was sentenced for some drug charges I got some time before this. I was ordered 4 years through probation. A few weeks into it, I got drug tested and failed for. I haven't touched it. Oh, fun. This is like my. So during this time that I was in drug court, so let me tell you guys how I got into drug court. It was such a God thing. So basically, like, whenever I went to jail, I went to have like a drug court meeting, because drug court is a big thing. It's like an honor to be in that program, and it's something that will wipe your record clean if you finish the program. So, but it's not easy. It's like, it was so insane, but I needed this to whip me into shape. I needed it. Hi, it's me from the future. I am inserting myself here because I didn't actually even tell you guys what the God thing was for me to get into the drug court program. So basically, drug court does not allow anybody into the program that has a distribution charge or something along those lines. So the reason I had gotten denied drug court before, when I first started getting arrested for drugs, was because I was in trouble for selling drugs at school. Even though that wasn't the charge on record, it was still on the case file. So I didn't get accepted then. And then so when I went up to the judge and he was mentioning drug court, he was like, well, let's give you a chance. Even though we usually don't let something like this happen, like, we'll do it for you. And I just owe that all to God. I got into a really, really abusive relationship, and it was physically abusive, emotionally abusive, financially abusive. I didn't even want to be in the relationship in the first place, but I had the fear of the person, like, in me. Stop it. And I also knew had this person like telling me that they were going to kill themselves if I left them. It was so terrible. Just, I can't believe that so many people in my life still don't know that I went through that, physically and emotional abuse. So anyway, this was towards the end of drug court. I was so excited for it to end because I was going to just do drugs again, and that's how I was going to survive my life with this person, and that was gonna be it. It was like perfect. I'm like, okay, I'll get through it if I have drugs. And I just remember, I don't remember how the timeline works, but I just remember one night in my car, just wanting to kill myself so bad and just not knowing how to do it, and just kind of being too chicken to do it and to figure out what way I could make it happen without like chickening out and worrying about like the pain and just all that stuff. Like I've always just been like a little wuss. So I was like, okay, well hopefully I'll just die at some point, like from drugs or something. And I just remember just being in that car and having those thoughts, and I just like I don't want to cry, but I didn't have God in my life at this point. But whenever I think of that moment in the car, I always feel like Jesus was right there. And I'm literally getting like chills all up and down my body because he's always there, but in that moment specifically, like I feel like he was really there. He was probably like just trying to hug me or something. And after drug court, I finally had the courage, because this is when it started getting physical, so I finally like had the courage to leave. Graduated drug court, I finally had the courage to leave. A few short weeks after that, for a moment of time, like I was self-sabotaging, I guess. Like I was driving around drunk and I was doing things and I was partying more, and I finally had this freedom of like leaving this toxic and abusive relationship, and I was going way too hard. And thank God I met my husband just like a few months after this, and once I met him, I knew I wanted to marry him. I knew for a fact that I wanted to marry my husband, and we have like a rocky relationship. Again, I don't want to get too far into this segment of my life on camera and like on YouTube, because it's his story like to share if he ever wants to. And long story short, about 4 years into our relationship, we were going through something really, really hard, and we had already been like on and off, like kind of breaking up, kind of not. We had lived together this time. Again, I was not a Christian, so I was like living with my boyfriend, and I was like, you know, doing things that I shouldn't have been doing before marriage with him. And we got to the point where he finally like had enough of me, and I don't blame him. Like I was a really awesome girlfriend in many different ways, I'm sure, but I had so many demons. I was so hurt, and like, you know, hurt people. It's so true. I wasn't in any way trying to be abusive towards him, nor do I think I was abusive, but I was not treating him the way that he should have been treated and the way that I wanted him to treat me. Like, because he was also, you know, like he wasn't a Christian. I don't think that anybody that's not a Christian can honestly say that they've got it all together, because you need Jesus for that. You always have a void in your heart unless you have God. So he finally had enough of me and he left me. And at this point, it was so real because of the fact that, hold on, back up. During the time that we were like on, like that last 2 months before we officially broke up, my friend started dating this girl, and her name is Alexandra. And I'm just gonna shout her out real quick because she knows how much I love her and how much I owe her my salvation, because he started dating this girl. She was incredible. And she was happy. She wasn't like partaking in all these like rude and crude jokes. She had class. She had respect for herself and other people around her. And I was like, oh my gosh, this girl is amazing. Like, I want to be like her. And it's so funny because she was a Christian. She had the love of God in her. She had grown up with Jesus. Like, she was everything that I wanted to be. And I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I just need to try this Jesus thing. Like, nothing else has worked for me ever in my life. So I started to just kind of like listen to sermons online, like on YouTube. Not anybody that I would listen to anymore, because I've grown in my faith a lot and I've learned about kind of like all of these feel good sermons and stuff. And I needed that at the time. And I'm glad I found those and God led me to that at the time. But now that I'm stronger in my faith, I just don't listen to pastors that I used to listen to. But anyway, that's besides the point. The point is I had seeds planted in me for these few weeks. And then finally, like I said, we broke up and I owe it all to Jesus. Like, Jesus knew that he had to tear down to the ground and start something new. He needed to build a new relationship on fixed foundation. And that's exactly what he did. So we were apart for like 2 weeks, and my husband like did things that he wasn't proud of doing while we were like separated. I mean, we were broken up. And what I think I was going to say earlier was the reason that I knew that this was like a very serious breakup was because we were supposed to re-sign our lease at our apartment complex, and we didn't. He was like, nope, we're not doing it. We're broken up. Why would we? And I'm like, what? Devastated. But this is what led me to Jesus, because when we broke up, I listened to a sermon message from Sarah Jakes Roberts. It's called Girl Get Up. And this sermon saved my life. It explained who we are. It explains what we go through, who we were before we go through the things that we go through. It explained who the enemy is. Who the enemy is versus who God is so different, because I feel like a lot of people always wonder like, oh, well, why does God let bad things happen? It's not God creating these bad things to happen. It's like God allows things to happen to us, not only to just build us up and stuff, but if you're living in sin, like, he gives you free will. And if you're living in sin, you're attracting all these things, all these bad things that you're allowing. If you're listening to nasty music, watching nasty things, if you're like, the enemy is just, you're essentially picking a side. And when you're not picking Jesus, you're picking evil. And anywho, she was so good at explaining that to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, God's actually not like a bad guy. Like, you're making sense. It's like the math is mathing. And I just remember like crying my eyes out and just being like, yes, like, I accept you, Jesus. You are my Lord and Savior. As long as I have you, I do not need this relationship. Although I want the relationship, I don't want it if it's not for me. Please help me. Please help me believe that. And I remember like after my husband, my then boyfriend, like my then ex-boyfriend, after my then ex-boyfriend came to me and was like, hey, like, I want to be with you for the rest of my life, and I don't like to make apart, and like, I just have done things that I'm not proud of, and I only want you. I was driving in the car and I was like, oh, Lord, if you want me to forgive him, I will. I don't want to forgive him just because I want to be with him so bad and it not actually be your will for me. I want you to help me move forward with this, however you want my life to play out. And I was like, but I do want to forgive him. Like, I want to be together. And I just remember driving in my car and this white bird, beautiful, beautiful white bird, just started flying. This is my car. This is the bird. I'm just driving. The bird is just birding for maybe 15-20 seconds, which doesn't sound like a long time, but whenever you're just like sit here and count to 15 seconds, that is actually a long time to just be there and just see this bird. And just, that was God. That was God for me. The bird was birding. That was Jesus. I was like, okay, like, let's rebuild this. And it wasn't easy. For a long time, I was living as a lukewarm Christian. Oh, by the way, I should mention that right after my husband and I got together, we got pregnant. That was like a big change in my life, because the Lord knew that I just needed like my son to just to be a mom and do the things that I'm doing now, and just like stewarding this beautiful baby boy and just witnessing God's love and witnessing God's creation and like his reign and his sovereignty and his perfect plan, and the way like this little baby, like I was living lukewarm Christianity. I was going to a lukewarm church. It was a progressive church, and I knew that I was missing something. I didn't know what it was, but I wanted to find a church. So we were church shopping. We had told my in-laws, who were living in California at the time, that we were pregnant, and they were like, well, we gotta move back to the southeast. So they ended up moving to where we live now, and we had just visited here like a year before that, like as a family, like we all came and visited, and we were all like, dang, this place is pretty cool, we could live here, this is so amazing, like why don't we just pack up our bags and move? So they actually packed up their bags and moved here, and we were like, you know what, we should do that too, let's just do it. So we ended up moving to South Carolina, and 2 or 3 weeks into living here, I was already like trying to find churches. Before, I was doing my due diligence on churches here, and I was like, where should we go? Like I was asking Facebook groups, where do you go? And all these churches were like these mega churches that I was trying to get out of. So none of them felt right with my heart, but we did visit a few, we watched a few online, and then I'm back with a special guest that will probably make an appearance on camera. If you hear stuff in the background, please just hang tight, because I'm about to close out this video. But anywho, I don't remember exactly where I left off, but oh, I think I do remember. Okay, so this pastor at the church that we are at now, he reads straight from the Bible. If he is reading like a verse in the Bible and he is wanting to reiterate it, it's all just still biblically backed. It all is, and it's amazing, and that's exactly what we needed. And I feel like that's what I was missing at other churches that I didn't know I was missing, but it was just this thirst for more. And so because of that church, I stepped out of my lukewarm Christian lifestyle, where I was still listening to whatever I wanted to listen to, watching things that weren't honoring Christ and that were leading me down slippery slopes. I got baptized at the church, and I just love all of the convictions that helped me become a better Christian. I did a fast with the church. I love it. People walk out their faith, parents walk out their faith, and the youth on their Wednesday night service. James, sounds like there's a truck outside. Okay, again, I had to get up and come back, and I don't really know where I left off, but ultimately, I'm so happy I ended up at the church I'm at, because I feel like lukewarm Christianity is such a detriment to our society finding Jesus, because you can post all you want about how much Jesus is the best, and you can post scripture and Bible verses on your stuff, but if your next post is about, you know, a secular music artist that posting a booty shot, it just doesn't, it's not good for people who need to be demonstrated what following God actually looks like. Okay, so my SD card's filling up, so this is my goodbye. I pray that you guys have an amazing day, and this is just a reminder that you are not too far gone for the Lord to forgive you for everything that you've done, and to make your life so much better than you could have ever even imagined. He wants to do that for you. He wants to be a father that blesses you and prospers you and just pushes you forward with just the best life ever. So I love you. Have an amazing day.